call the September 15th Finance Committee meeting to order. Bill, do you have the roll?
Yeah, I have Sullivan, Ramsey, Fazard present.
Okay, first item is approval of the minutes. Is there a motion?
Moved.
Second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of accepting the minutes signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries. Next item is audit of the bills. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
Is there a second? Okay. Any discussion?
Any additions to this bill?
No additions tonight.
All right. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 1 under resolutions is Resolution 2020-43, requesting exemption from the county library tax. Is there a motion here?
So moved. I'll second that.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
And
Next
just on
item.
that item, before you move on, I just want to report there is no required increase in our formula. So to meet this requirement, we just need to maintain at least the level of funding that we have in the 2020 budget.
Perfect.
Item 2 is Resolution 2020-44, approving tax increment district number 3 project plan amendment number 10. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
So is there any discussion here?
Just want to let you know, we do have Scott Harrington and Jeff Maloney from Vanderwall here, and they're prepared to make a brief presentation if you'd like and answer questions along with city staff.
All right. Why don't you guys go ahead with however you want to start that.
And Scott, do you want me to let you share your screen, or I have the slides too I can bring up, whatever's easiest for you?
Let me start by unmuting. Yeah, it'd probably be easier if you wanted to share your screen. I don't know if you wanted to make any opening remarks, but I can go through my presentation if you'd like.
Okay. Yeah, just as way of very brief introduction, we've been talking about doing an amendment to TID number 3. As you know, that the city has done several amendments in the past, removing, I think it's about $340 million of value from the TID. We've been planning for this for over a year. One of the main items that is included in this subtraction amendment is taking out the Spectrum property, which has now fulfilled its obligation under the TIF agreement, also the Costco property. And in looking at putting this together, we tried to identify any properties where the obligations have been satisfied, that are developed or not likely to redevelopment during the remaining life of the TIF. Take that out, both returning that tax base to the taxpayers and the other taxing jurisdictions. And it also would provide a levy limit adjustment opportunity for the city based on half of the value that's subtracted. And then with doing the amendment, we've also worked with Vanderwall to develop a project plan that identifies other potential projects in the remaining life of the TIF district and provides some additional expenditure authority, especially for developer finance TIF incentives, with all the activity we've had with the good thing, we've been getting closer to the limits that were in the previous amendment. So with that, I would turn it over to the folks from Vanderwall.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, as Bill indicated, this is actually our, I think, 5th subtraction. But thanks to Bill's hard work with the legislature, the benefits to the city are even greater because in addition to returning $120 million to the tax rolls in general to help keep the tax rate down, there was a legislative change kind of led by Bill's initiative to get credit for this removed property to count portion of it to count towards new construction when you calculate your levy limit. And so as far as the city's ability to get additional revenue, we now have that, where we didn't have that previously under the law. You only got that when you closed the district, not when you did these voluntary subtractions. So while it's been a tremendous benefit to the city and the underlying taxing districts from the previous subtractions, this one is even better. I think, as most of you know, that TIF's really the most powerful tool that communities have to spur growth and development, and really the single most powerful tool that we have. Go to the next slide, please. When you create a TIF, you establish a base value. What's the property worth at the time the district's created? And the taxing entities continue to generate tax revenue off of that base value, but as the value increases, the taxes on that increased value all go to the district to help promote growth and development within the district, so that when you close the district, you've dramatically increased the valuation, and all the taxing jurisdictions benefit. And I'll have a graph here in a minute to kind of show you what that means in terms of Middleton. Go to the next one, please. So just, again, terminology. Base value is the valuation when the district is created. Value increment is that increase in value that occurs from growth in the district over time. Tax increments, the actual revenue that you receive from that growth in value. And then the Joint Review Board has representatives from the overlying taxing districts, the school district, the community college, the county, as well as the city at large, to have final approval over a district. TID and TIF, I kind of use them interchangeably. A TID is the actual physical area. A TIF is the tool. So previously, the city's already subtracted $340 million in 4 separate amendments. That's allowed the taxing jurisdictions, which the city's general fund is one of them, to receive an additional $6.6 million in annual tax revenue from that subtracted amount. And we've had permitted total expenditures of $178 million, with 118 spent as of the end of last year. Go to the next one, please. With this amendment number 10, we're subtracting 33 parcels. Bill kind of gave you a highlight of those, but again, these are ones that are pretty much built out, and there's no further development agreements pending on them. And so they're not likely to change between now and the end of the district. So removing them and letting everybody take advantage of this increased tax base is something we wanted to do. At the same time, we're adding 6 where there is some redevelopment potential, but overall we're reducing the base value of the district by $4.6 million. We're subtracting $130 million in increment, which is going to allow the taxing jurisdictions to get another $2.5 million annually from that $130 million that we're subtracting. We're asking for an increase in spending of another $63 million, and looking at another $98 million in development between now and the end of the close of the district. But even with this subtraction, we still have over $500 million worth of value in it. Go to the next slide, please. I think was the map. Yeah, so maps in the plan document, a little hard to read at this scale, but basically those properties that are striped in red are the ones that are coming out. And then there's just a very small 4 to 6 properties in green that are being added. One's kind of a lumber yard out on 14 that has some redevelopment interest in it. A couple others are at the corner of Parmenter and University downtown. And then we added a parcel in the very south end in order to retain contiguity, because all parts of the TIF have to touch one another. We can't have islands that are detached. So we added a greenway in order to retain our contiguity. Now we can go to the next one. So I showed that earlier graphic, it, kind of in theory how it works, but this is how it's worked in Middleton. When we created this TIF in 1993 and then did a slight addition after that, basically have a base value of about $60 million. Over time, we've reduced 340 million. We are now reducing another 130 million, but we still have 508 million in valuation in it. And we're expecting at least another 98. So we'll have almost $650 million in value projected by the time this district closes in 2030. So absolute tremendous amount of growth when we go from a $50 million, $60 million base value to over 600 million at the end, not including the nearly 500 million that we've taken out in the interim. Quite a remarkable feat, and certainly the city is to be congratulated for outstanding management of the district, probably one of the most successful in the entire state.
Or to put it another way, if you add together the subtractions, the TIF district has already generated almost $1 billion in development, and it'd be well over $1 billion if you just think how much that is by the time this district is completed.
Yes.
That's a huge number for any TIF district, believe me.
Yeah, without a doubt. This is just kind of a very quick financial summary on the expenditures. As I mentioned before, by the end of last year, spent about 118 million on various projects and assistance to developers. We have projected additional costs of another 63 million, some additional developer payments and cost recovery and donations to TID 5. So new spending between now and the end of the district, about 123. When we're all kind of said and done, that would take us up to about 242 million, which is more than what was previously contained in the amendment number 9 of 178. So in addition to these changes in boundaries, when we want to increase our total level of spending, that also has to be done via a formal amendment. I think as most of you are familiar with the spending plan, you can kind of spend more or less on individual projects, but you're kind of held to the bottom line. And so with this amendment, we're increasing the bottom line by that 63.7. Let's go to the next slide, please. So this is the list of costs. Many of these were in Amendment 9, and just we haven't gotten to them yet. Pleasant View Road certainly being one of them. That's been in the plan for a long time, but is now finally looking to come to fruition here in the next couple of years. Some of the improvements downtown likewise have been in the plan for a while, but the timing just hasn't been right, and we're carrying those forward. So this is a spending plan. I want to really emphasize that. It's a plan. It is not a budget. But this is how the city is intending to spend its funds. Obviously, when any of these would be undertaken, the city council would ensure that the revenue would in fact be available to pay for it before undertaking that. You're not required to do any of these things, but the things that you do want to do need to be listed in the plan. And as I mentioned a minute ago, these are rough estimates. The actual costs may be more or less on any individual item, but the bottom line is what we would be held to. Let's go to the next slide, please. I know this is really hard to read in a slide, and even now it's condensed from what's in table 6 within the plan document. But this just basically shows that with the additional expenditures and with additional development, we're still looking to close the district on time, which is 2030, and with even a sizable fund balance, perhaps of $15 million left. So it continues to, not only generate increment, but as far as a cash flow situation goes, it is cash flowing all of its expenses. There is a small borrowing plan maybe in the next couple of years, but we should easily be able to pay that back before the end of the district closure and still end up with surplus funds at the end. Let's go to the next one, please. So tonight is the city council meeting. This September 15th would be the official adoption date of this. This is kind of critical because we want to save the 2020 valuations as the valuations for this amendment, and that has to be done before the end of September. And so doing this tonight will ensure that. We then have a final joint review board meeting scheduled for the 21st. We had an initial meeting with them back in August to review these changes. They had really very few questions and no concerns expressed at that time. So we're assuming that on the 21st, that all should go as planned as well. So this is on the council agenda tonight for approval of the ordinance, which I think is on your agenda to make a recommendation. And at that point, I will be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Scott?
I appreciate that overview, Scott, very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
This was,
I got a couple of questions here. That is, let's start with the resolution. Point number 3, the Common Council hereby finds and determines that no less than 50% of the area of real property is a blighted area. Is that required to be stated that way? It's the resolution number 2020-14 or 44.
Right. Yeah, this is a blighted district. Obviously, as you have moved forward, a lot of the blight has been eliminated, but this is a required finding when you would approve this amendment.
You're required to put that more than 50% is blighted.
Right.
I see. And then you look at the item number 4, and it finds that all those projects are related to eliminating the blight. So that's also required then.
Right. So all of these numbered findings in here are required findings when you create the district and do an amendment. And because it's a blighted district, the principal use of project costs is to eliminate blight, which is basically what you've been doing.
So if you look at the item number 8, where it states that less than 35% of the expenditure will be on retail business, again, that's required.
Yes.
Even though, okay, so it doesn't matter what happens, but this is what we have to say.
it's retail business, Pradeep.
Yeah,
There's a big difference, right?
Yeah,
Right, because most of your TIF really isn't retail, it's more
35%. I
office.
just wonder why 35%? So, okay.
For retail, right? It's not suggesting that all business is limited to 35%. All it's saying is that retail business has to be limited to 35 or less.
Yeah,
So there's
I
a
know.
big difference, right? So all the buildings and all the corporate headquarters that are out there are not retail, which is why it's been so successful. It's all commercial property, but it's not retail property.
Yeah, that was, I was interested in why 35%. So it's sort of a requirement. So that's all I want to know. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So I had couple questions. There are planned donations to TID 5 worth about $8 million, I think is with it, 8.3 million bucks. What are those for?
Yeah, I'm going to defer to either Bill or Mike on that one.
One of them is the bike trail, right?
Actually, no. That language relating donations is exactly the same as the language that was approved in amendment number 9. It's just being carried forward in this amendment. There are no additional donations or added language there. I know one of the items that was discussed at the time of the number 9 amendment was using those funds as a potential donation to TID 5 related to infrastructure for the Meritor project. And then there was a schedule based on the different phases of Meritor of how and when those donations may take place. There was also language in the number 9 amendment that after all of the project costs had been incurred by TID 3, that there'd be potential to make an additional donation to TID 5 or another TID if the city council chose to do that. This project plan keeps that authority. It would be subject to approval by the council, but it's just carrying forward the language that was approved by the council in the 9th amendment.
Okay, so now go back to the resolution, I think it was item 4. How do those donations relate directly to eliminating blight in TIF 3?
The donations is, which one are you reading here?
Item 4.
Item 4, right. The project costs are different than donations.
Yes, Wisconsin state statutes allow for donations from this type of district to another blight elimination district, which TIF 5 is. So the language in item number 9 in the resolution is reflective and actually has the reference to the state statute that would allow for donations. Again, including it in the project plan doesn't require the council to do that, but it provides you with the authority to do that should the council choose to do that at some point in the remaining life of the TIF.
So what has been the total, because we've had donations from TID 3 to 5 previously, correct?
Actually, no, and there's a distinction in terms, and they sound similar, so it can be confusing, but we've done advances from TID 3 to TID 5. An advance is essentially a loan. You're providing the funds for cash flow purposes with the expectation that it's repaid. Donations is making a payment from TID 3 to TID 5 without the expectation that it would be repaid. It would be using basically some of the profit or some of the net funds generated from this TID to spur develop in another TID, but without that expectation that it be paid back. So to date, we've done advances, but we have not done any donations.
And is there so obviously we know about TID 5's kind of current finances or projected finances. Is there a scenario, or what happens if for whatever reason TID 5 can't repay all or some of those advances? Do those then get converted into quote unquote donations?
I think that would be a possible option for the council to decide to potentially forgive that and convert that to a donation, or to find other general city dollars to be used to repay that advance. We are projecting that TID 5 will be able to repay those advances, and from the amount that we had advanced, a large amount was the 2.6 million for the property where Conservancy Bend is. That has been repaid. There's about $2 million remaining, and that is projected to be repaid within TID 5's life period, or before the end of TID 3's life, I should say.
So this donation language in this this new amendment is put in basically to give us flexibility.
That's correct. It was flexibility that was added in Amendment 9, and this maintains that flexibility.
And we're carrying it
It will
forward.
still be subject to council approval before there would be a donation.
Thank you.
I just, I think we just, it's probably not a discussion for this point in time, but I think we need to be very circumspect in making donations to TID 5, because what that suggests is that it's not able to stand on its own. And, that's been the case all along here, is that it doesn't make any sense to have the TID 5 unless it's going to be self-sustaining, which is, I think, some of the source of my aggravation about spending money when there's no fund balance to do that. So, I just, everybody just needs to be aware that it is probably not as prudent as could be if we make these donations to fund things that TID 5 could not otherwise support. So, especially since the alternative would be to spend money on areas that the general fund has not been able to spend money on because of whatever capital restrictions we have, right? We still have a huge backlog of road projects. We still have a huge backlog of public lands projects.
Yep.
You know, this is not a money tree. This is basically what we need to do is make sure we understand that this is our retirement benefit, so to speak, and it's for the benefit of the citizens that have deferred getting these things while this TIF has been available or TIF has been in its life. And we really do need to treat it like it's, you know, it's our 401k that's going to support us in our retirement here for the overall city, not necessarily restricted back to TID 5. Is there any other?
Can I make a comment? It's Mike Davis. I agree with all that you said, but I think there's also a historical consideration on TID 3 as well. TID 3 didn't really get in a positive position because there was a great deal of borrowing in the early years until about the end of its 10th year. That was about 2003. And then that's when we started getting into a positive cash flow. For TID 3, the only thing that we could do at the time was to borrow. And so the city did borrow considerably to get projects going and to breathe life into the TIF district. With TID 5, it's an option, but it's only an option that TID 3 could donate and or advance at favorable interest rates, obviously, because we're internally banking it.
And I don't have a problem with that. I think the difference is from a donation perspective, what it does is it locks in whatever benefit that could have or reasonably should have belonged to the non-TIF areas, non-TID areas. Right. So
yeah, I agree. And I think, though, we have to remember that TID 3 was started in relatively good economic times, and TID 5 was started in the midst of a recession. And so it started on a not level playing field.
But the other side of that is that there's only a 5-year difference in expenditure periods and a 5-year difference and a 5 or 6 year difference in useful life, not useful life, but the life of the TID, right? So those windows are so close together that we really need to make sure that whatever we do with TID 5, that it does make sense financially, because it's so close to end of life after TID 3, right? I understand that the expenditure period for 3 is what, coming up in 4 years, 5 years from now. The expenditure period for TID 5 is in 10 years, right? So if and when we get to the end of TID 3 and there is any discussion of a donation, I think we need to make sure that we understand the ramifications of making that donation in term and conversely, bringing that money back into the non-TID areas. right? There's opportunity costs for both.
I agree.
All right, any other discussion for this amendment or this ordinance? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? And the motion carries. We're on item 3.
See you at the council meeting.
Resolution 2020-45, amending the 2020 general fund budget to support fire suppression alarm plan review services. Before. Oh, never mind. I must have been looking at another agenda. So is there a motion here for this?
So moved.
Second.
Yeah. Is there any discussion?
I apologize. I just, as I brought this up now, noticed there needs to be a correction in the resolution. This refers to the 2019 budget. That of course should be the 2020 budget. Until I used the template from last year, so I apologize for not catching that one.
So is your motion as amended? Whoever made those motions in
Absolutely, yes.
seconds?
Yep.
Okay. Where is the expense side of this? I see the revenue side, but where's the expense side?
In the building inspection budget, it'd be $1,000 increase to the building inspection budget. And that would be for the time for the part-time on-call plan review position. It's a relatively small cost, just be a few hours per plan review, but that's based on the estimates that the building inspector had put together of the hours that would be involved for these type of reviews for the remainder of 2020.
All right, I'll play that game. So what's the materiality threshold that $8,700 requires an amendment and $1,000 doesn't?
Yeah, I think our ordinances actually give the administrator the authority to make budget adjustments of up to $1,000. So as we were putting this together and saw that the estimate came in at about $1,000, this probably wouldn't need a formal budget amendment, but at the prior meeting, we discussed bring a resolution back with an amendment. And certainly we can do an amendment for items as low as $1,000. But technically by our ordinances, up to 1,000 could be done administratively.
All right, any other questions on this one? All right, hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And the motion carries. Under agreements and contracts, item 1 is engagement letter with Baker Tilly for water utility rate case. Is there a motion?
So moved. I'll second.
Is there any discussion? All right, hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? And the motion carries. Item 2 is contract with Oya Studio for downtown entry mural, 1920 Parmenter Street.
I'll move approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Was there a copy of this in the packet? I didn't see one in the finance packet. Is it in the
This was the item that was added when the agenda was revised yesterday, so it is in the updated packet. But if you downloaded your packet prior to yesterday, you would have had to refresh the attachments. So I apologize if you did not see that in there. The total cost is $5,000, and that would be split between Arts Commission and the CDA.
And where is this going? 1920? Where's that?
The location is on the side of the Roman Candle Building. So like the big orange wall would be the background of the mural.
Okay. Any other discussion for this? All right, hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Under miscellaneous building inspection fee recommendations here. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Do we have any idea with these new amounts? What kind of dollars we would be talking about in a project? I mean, was there any case study done, if you will, as to what our fees are now and what it would be with the new fees? I'm just curious because one of the things that we talk about is the amount of fees and what they cost and for developers and for building houses and so on and so forth. So I'd just be curious as to what that would amount to.
Jim, are you going to take that?
The only one that went up, I would consider a large amount, would be the Group 3 new construction, which is something we do not see a whole lot of. It is the warehouse storage style refrigeration complex buildings. We do not see a lot of those. We do not get a lot of permits in for those. We were, to have the additional square footage cost on there made no sense. So we made that one, go up the 1 cent for over 10,000 square feet. So it's not going to be a huge impact. The Group 1 increase from 0.07 to 0.09, you're talking 3 cents a square foot. It's not a huge, none of these were drastic increases by any means. It's just to stay current with our surrounding communities and the times. We haven't raised or altered these fees or reviewed them since 2012.
I'm not arguing the increase. I'm not arguing it at all. I'm just looking for an illustration. That's all. I was just curious.
I think what he's getting at is that, if you took 5 different types of buildings under the old structure, what would the fees be? Under the new structure, what would the fees be? That's all he's looking for. It's just what's the impact of 5 or 6, different types of projects here. I think Dan, I don't think you have a problem with what he's done. I think you're just looking for an illustration. So
That's exactly.
If you could come back.
It would go by the square foot of the building. They're all different sizes. It's going to increase by 3 cents a square foot per the size of the project. So I could take a 100,000 square foot building, multiplied by the 0.075, which would be, give me 2 seconds, get my calculator out.
That I think that's all he's looking for is if you just took 5 projects that were done under the old fee structure, converted them to the new fee structure, just what would that look like?
Yeah, I could get that put together.
Yep, that's fine. Could you just give it to Bill so he could throw it in next week's or the next meeting's packet, just as a illustration?
Yep.
Is that okay for you, Dan?
It's perfect. Exactly what I want.
Okay. All right. Any other discussion on this? All right. Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Item 2 is renewal of health insurance benefit program with Quartz.
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
I was going to ask Mike, is anybody here from Quartz that wants to review this like they've done previously, or are we just running with it?
I think it's essentially the same program that we had last year. or this year, that we have this year, with 4.9% increase. I don't think we've added or subtracted anything from the substance of our health insurance coverage.
Was it last year or the prior year where we had talked about possibly joining with the school board for population? Is that still nowhere, or is it something we're still kicking around?
We're still kicking it around. I went to a meeting with school districts to explore that possibility. I think that the difference is that they have a different calendar year than we do, a different fiscal year, and that in our case with the school district, I believe they've got 2 major providers as opposed to our 1. So we would probably have to consider doing exactly what they're doing. We have such a much smaller base of employees that it makes it challenging to look at 2 providers. With courts, what we're able to do with our relatively small group is to use our leverage with 1 to get a better rate. They could have gone up to 8% this year, and we were able to negotiate it to 4.9%, which is pretty significant.
Right. No, I just figured that if, you know, they've got such a large population to start with, that whatever the city could bring might bring benefits to both. But if it's not going to work, it's not going to work.
Well, and you know, this past year we had some pretty significant claims. We were able to make the case that those were one-time claims, and that's something that would be of an ongoing nature. And I think that made the difference in negotiating it for this year, for 2021, that is.
Okay. Any other discussion here? All right.
Mike, I have a question for you that maybe you already talked about it. At one time, we were considering joining the school district. So you're not doing it just because there are 2 there, right? We have only quads and they have quads and somebody else too.
Yeah, they have courts and Dean, I believe, or SSM, whatever it's known by now.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. And now for something that everybody's been waiting for. Item 3 is consideration of establishing a local business loan program in collaboration with the MADC. Somebody want to take this?
I'll take it. I think Kevin Mahaney is from MADC is planning to be on the council meeting. I don't see him on the participants for this meeting, but the concept that we're bringing forward is the Middleton Area Development Corporation would put up $100,000 to match city $100,000 for a total of $200,000. The general concept is that MADC would administer the program. I think, you know, Luke used the term at the last meeting of this being a bridge program. We hope it's a bridge. We hope there's something more coming from the federal government. But right now, there aren't many options available for local businesses, and many are teetering on the brink. What MADC would administer the program, there would be up to 4% charged on loans, depending upon the risk, and up to a 5-year payback on the loan, which is a fairly generous term. And as is mentioned here under the credit risk, the final measure of it will not be known for at least 3 to 4 years when all the loans have matured or defaulted. If it's up to 5 years, it could be even that high before we know. But if, and I hope the council is interested in adopting this program, we'll have the ability to provide some kind of bridge assistance. I think with this dollar amount, we're going to have to seriously consider that we can't go beyond 10,000 for any one loan, or maybe on a special circumstance we could consider it, but it would be very difficult with no more than 200,000 to go that route. That's the general concept. To get into more detail, or the council could specify details as well. I included in your packet what other communities around the state are doing. Luke had started this, and I completed it with Sun Prairie's and Fitchburg's programs. It doesn't read the best on this screen, but you can see that some of the programs have included that they want a brick and mortar presence in the community. Some have revenue caps for the business. I think Fitchburg just went up to a $2.5 million revenue cap, but that's after they had only issued 2 loans previously. They just expanded the revenue cap to 2.5 million. You can see one of the communities, Wauwatosa, has a 5 to 7 year payback. There's 2% interest rates on a few. I think Fitchburg's got 1%. So it varies on a wide variety of things here. But one of the provisions that was considered by communities too was that the business was in good financial health in 2019 prior to COVID. That's a trickier one, I think. I would want to defer to a banker like Kevin with his expertise on this before we make any firm movement forward. But I think that one would be a tougher one to administer.
Mike, so first and foremost, great work on pulling all of this together. Really outstanding stuff. I think one of the, remembering when the early days of this conversation, I think one of the concerns was that there wasn't necessarily the expertise to be able to evaluate the quality of the loan applications. Given that MADC was all volunteer led, and that the city staff didn't necessarily have someone in charge of like economic development as Sun Prairie and Fitchburg did, who are in charge of evaluating those loans. Have you and Kevin discussed that? And if so, what has been the conclusion that you guys have come to circumvent that?
Well, Kevin has indicated that MADC is willing to do the work in administering the loans.
Great.
So I was hoping he'd be on this call, but he's not. So that would be a definite question to ask him at the council meeting. But yeah, I think MADC's willingness to administer the program makes a lot of sense. This would be as Kevin termed it, a high-risk loan fund. MADC hasn't really done much for high-risk loans, but we know what the temperature is in the business community right now, and for folks seeking loans at this point, it's likely that they are in desperate straits.
So, Mike, you had talked about lending at prime, which I think was somewhere around between 3 and 4. I think last time we had that discussion, right?
Right. Bill's looking it up.
Which is
what is it, Bill?
I thought it was 3.25. I'm just double checking that. And yeah, it is 3.25.
Yep.
So I've been on enough Zoom meetings. I know what Bill's up to.
But I think that part of the thought process for finance, at least, was that we subsidize that interest rate. Is that possible for the city to still share this with MADC, but somehow subsidize the interest rate down to closer to 1?
I would
Right,
defer to
right.
Bill or Kevin if Kevin gets on the call here.
Right. The original thought was that we would provide either no interest or low interest loans. I understand that they're risky. I get that. But part of the draw, at least in my mind, was that, you know, businesses aren't really going to look for another prime loan, right? They're looking for, basically, they're looking for more help than that.
Right.
But I understand. So that was the discussion, Bill. I don't know if you had any other further thoughts about that second order comment that came through the guidance in terms of grants. But you know, my sense is that businesses that the ones that are really hurting are the really looking for grants and not loans. And if all we're doing is going to offer a prime loan, I'm wondering how much interest we're going to get. Interest in the loan programs.
Mark, a lot of these, they start out with no interest for the first 6 months or 12 months, so that as people are recovering from the pandemic, they have a time to get their feet on the ground, and then they can, you know, then we could kind of scale up the interest so that we're encouraging people to pay it back as they can. But, you know, it's still very helpful for them to have that extra funds available.
Well,
Under
yeah,
the
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Mark.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to point out what you have right in front of you here under the loan program. The initial 6-month period would be interest only, and the interest payments may be placed on deferral. I think MADC wants the ability to make that judgment on the loan and work individually with each loan entity.
Okay.
And they acknowledge right here that personal guarantee is most likely what's going to be used, as opposed to any kind of real security. It's likely to be unsecured in most cases.
And are we splitting the cost of the underwriting with MADC, or who are they picking it up?
I believe they're picking up the cost of the underwriting. We're splitting the cost on the failure of the loans. You know, that we would split that risk evenly with MADC.
Okay. I like the fact that we have a mechanism to get this done. I think that was probably the biggest hurdle. I think this thing needs probably a little bit more work on terms of the loan. I'm just not sure how, right? So if somebody's really hurt, they're not going to be able to pay interest only for obviously, well, even if we deferred the 6 months of interest only, you know, after this, on the 7th month, when they are responsible for starting to pay back principal, I'm wondering if they're going to have that capacity. So it makes me wonder if it again, you know, if MADC is going to be the experts in this. It just seems to me that you know, we ought to be able to have some more flexibility in terms of, you know, no interest for the first year, or for, you know, not have any principal payments for the first year as well. And what would that look like from you know, what does that do for us in terms of risk and overall ability to make this successful?
I like the way you're leaning on that, Mark. I wish, I think we need to have that conversation with Kevin, but you know, the more generous that we can be with the program, the more likely we'll get loan applicants on this. We're not looking at grants. I had that direction from the past council meeting, but we are looking at something that is closer to zero. But I think we have to try to balance that with MADC's ability to recoup their costs for their time and effort as well.
Well, that's why I'm suggesting that we may end up subsidizing the interest payments in addition to our contribution, right? Something along that. And then the other thing is that, this is a pretty low balance. I think that we should probably figure out a way to possibly add to that program the dollar value with or without MADC's participation.
One thing that Kevin had mentioned to me too, he didn't put it in the proposal, but that we could start off with 25,000 at a time from each entity to get it going, and see, try to adapt as we see how our experience is going and getting loan applications moving forward.
Right, but well, maybe you have a better sense of what he's willing to throw into this, but I'm just concerned that, if we had $10,000 as a cap and we have 30 people that are looking for 10 grand, we're out of money. So just, maybe we can work this out so that after the first 200, the city might underwrite or actually contribute the capital to fund another, say, 200,000 or 300,000 in loans.
Right. I think from what Bill and I had talked about, Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, but we talked about doing internal transfers initially, and then Bill would borrow the actual amount needed through the state trust fund loan program at the end of the year, once we have a better sense of how much that might be. So a little bit of this would be playing it by ear.
Right, and I understand that. I'm just trying to get to some point where I think, well, I'm just trying to make it more enticing to the business owners.
Yeah, so that would be a good thing for us to discuss with Kevin as well. But if you're inclined and the committee is inclined to make a recommendation for even more funds, if the demand is there for the loans, I think that would be very well received by the business community.
Well, are you looking for that tonight, or just, this is just consideration on the agenda? I think it would be prudent for us to fund that next whatever it is, right? So once that 200 grand is exhausted, that well, and I understand we're trying to do this on a get your toes wet kind of deal, but I think the council should be receptive to possibly kicking in more than the original 100,000. And if it's another 100 or 200,000, I think that's probably pretty prudent for us to do this to get the business owners moving again.
Do you think
my sense is that MADC would probably work with us in matching that as well. I think they want to be helpful. They know that the pain is real, and we're past the PPP loan stages now.
Right.
Sorry, Luke.
No,
Go ahead, Luke.
I was just going to say, Mark, are you thinking that some of that additional money will go towards the offsetting of the interest rate you were talking about?
Well, I think we need to have that discussion with Kevin, but certainly that's one scenario. The other scenario is that it would be, a second source of funding for whatever loans over that the original 200,000 there is.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think it's more important, right, that this is a great start, that we have at least a framework to get this thing going. And I understand that it's, this is all going to be businesses dependent. But I just, I don't want to get us into a point where we're going to stop something that's a good thing for the businesses.
Yeah, if I could add, Mark, I think this is a great start, and kudos to Bill and Mike, and especially Kevin. And that was a big hurdle. And you had a question that who's going to manage it. They have one of the firms, Foreman or whatever, they're going to be managing it. So I guess they will charge something. But
No, that's just legal documents. MADC is gonna underwrite and service these loans.
Yeah, I know. So, but I think if you look what happened at Fitchburg and at Sun Prairie, they had just 1 or 2 loans. So I think if we can, place help 8, 10, 15, 20 businesses with this, I think that would be great. So then if we need more, of course, we can come back to it. So.
Right. So what do you need from us on this? Is it something where you're looking for just an expression of support?
Well, I think we could consider it along lines of a conceptual approval, subject to filling in the blanks and a little bit more detail at the next council meeting.
Right. This certainly ought to be documented by agreement. I added a few questions as well about the documents, but there are things that will be easily fleshed out in an agreement.
I'd move conceptual approval of the loan program.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any other discussion?
We want, as part of our conceptual agreement, the things that we've talked about, which is potentially increasing the amount and looking at subsidizing the interest rates.
Yes.
I hope so. Yeah. So you have a sense of what we're looking for, right, Mike?
Yes.
For further discussions with Kevin?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was part of the motion. The conceptual agreement.
Right. So guys, I'm not the resident expert on this. Is there something else that any of the other council members or finance committee members are looking for in this, or have we hit the major points?
The only other thing I would say is, that I saw as part of the review of the other programs that some communities are putting in place is restrictions around where how that money can be spent. So, some of them say can't go to salaries, some say it can, some are very ambiguous. And so that was the only thing that I noted that maybe require a little bit more discussion around is, do we want to be a little bit more prescriptive around the intended use of the funds?
Well, I think that's part of the underwriting process, that maybe MADC can come back with a set of recommendations on what they would send that, right? I think the only thing that I would be opposed to would be expansion, and I'm not sure about marketing, whether that's a legitimate use for the purpose for the money. I think this was, maybe everybody's going to have their own view on this. My sense is that it's really just to give businesses the working capital just to stay in business.
Right.
Not necessarily to help them expand, or not necessarily to do, advertise. Well, I don't know about advertising and marketing.
I feel marketing would be an important part, because a lot of these businesses they're changing and pivoting, and they have to, if they're offering a new way of doing things, that they'd have to get the word out to people. And I think marketing could be a very important part of this.
Well, I'm not interested in limiting. Each business is going to kind of have an idea of what that they need to do.
Yeah, they know that.
I don't have a whole lot of things that I'm interested in limiting. However, I agree with expansion or remodeling or anything like that. I like you, Mark, see it more as something to keep cash flow,
Yeah.
to keep them
Or-
solvent.
Or investing or,
Yeah.
Yeah, I
I
would
like,
say let's give MADC a chance and ask Kevin or have a meeting with Kevin because I mean they do work for a living, so they would have a lot of good ideas. So
I think Sun Prairie's got a pretty good list if you look at their eligible uses. There it is.
Keep in mind, though, that I mean, perhaps that's one of the reasons why the Sun Prairie program hasn't really seen much of an uptick in terms of use, right?
And they've had what, 2?
Yeah.
Well,
I
they've had one, but they just recently modified their program to try to make it more attractive. So I think this is what they've come up with most recently.
Well, I think it's more important that we get this thing rolling, and I think we
right.
can make minor changes as we go along.
Agreed.
So,
Agreed. Yeah.
What I hear Larry saying too is we'll need to have an agreement between MADC and the city for the use of the funds.
right.
So I would anticipate we'll put that in the form of a resolution for the next finance and council meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there any other discussion? Do you have all you need from us, Mike?
Yes.
Mark, I was wondering if I could comment.
Sure. Go ahead, Susan.
Yeah, what I haven't heard discussion of tonight, and what's been my concern all along, is being able to get information to all the businesses in the city. And
Well-
not limit, and to be able to provide loans to businesses throughout the whole city. I don't want to limit it to an area.
No, and I don't think that's been part of the discussion either. This is open to every business. Well, that's going to be one of those things, right? Whether it ultimately comes down to a brick and mortar or whether it's, I'm not so sure where people are going to end on this, but I think that, the only restriction might be that the business is located in the city.
Yeah,
Right.
I think it should be located in the city. I don't think it should be restricted to TIF district.
Oh, clearly not.
No,
Yeah,
I don't believe anybody's advocating for that.
no.
I got a different impression, but anyway.
No, there's never, not tonight. There's never been a discussion about
tonight.
whether, right? So I think everybody's in agreement that this is open to any business that is located,
city, yeah.
physically located in the city.
I think
Okay,
Susan,
and-
what Susan's remembering is that at our initial meeting about this in May, Larry Beckler was very clear that TIF funds cannot be used outside of the TIF for this purpose.
Right.
Right.
That was when we were talking about potentially using TIF funds, but at this point, we're not.
Yes. But I
Right.
really want to be sure that, because I know there are businesses that don't belong to the chamber. So I want to be sure all the businesses can be aware that there is this grant program
Well, we can talk about that later,
or a loan program.
having advertising it through the papers or listserv or some other mechanism.
Yeah.
Just as an FYI, the Chamber of Commerce does have about 650 to 700 members, but I believe they also were able to make it available, the survey available to more than just their members. And I know we were able to do that through social media, put it out on Nextdoor, on Facebook, and as well as Notify Me. I don't know how we can get to all of the businesses, Susan. There
Yeah,
are
I
some
guess
that don't have.
the ones in Middleton Hills that rent from Dan Erdman are not members of the chamber. Because when I went through specifically looking at that list. And so I want to be sure, because those are small businesses, just like anywhere else. I want to be sure they have an opportunity and they've had needs.
Well, and I think we'll do whatever we can to make sure that as best we can, that everybody knows that we have a program when we get it out. But like Mike was saying, unfortunately, there's no guarantees that we're going to hit everybody, but we can talk to the local media. We can put it on all the social media. As council members, we can talk to the businesses in our districts. I mean, I think that everybody is on board, and will do the best that they can to make sure as many people as possible know of it.
Speaking of businesses, I know that Polco indicated that they had about a list of about 1,200 business addresses, and I've already gotten back 100 postcards that for businesses not at the right address. But I think this is just illustrative of how difficult it is to pin down businesses if they're at a specific location. Some businesses do not even, I mean, they are out of the home in many cases, small businesses in particular.
Is there a way of, in some cases, do we know landlords?
I'm going to move on. That's more an implementation phase. So let's let this go. We can figure out how we implement this thing from a advertising perspective at some point. I think what you're hearing from the members is that we are not trying to restrict this in any way. We really need to get this thing, get MADC to have this thing fleshed out before we can start talking about specific implementation steps, right? I haven't heard any differently, but my sense is that we want this to be available to all city businesses, regardless of where.
Just to quickly answer Susan's question, the city doesn't have a list of landlords either.
Yeah, that's probably true.
It is true. I mean, the only list of businesses that we have are those that pay utilities and are in the commercial classification. We would have to do a mass mailing to those businesses, and that gets to be pretty costly to do that. But that's something, if the council wants to make sure that we get it out to people by snail mail, that would be one way to do it. I just think that we're going to find that we don't get much more takers from doing that.
All right. So are you good with what we have so far, Mike?
Yes.
Okay. Do we need to vote on? I guess we do need to vote on this. Just so the motion is conceptual approval. Is there any other discussion on this? All right. Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. I believe that's it. Is there a motion? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Finance is adjourned.